Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and this time we have gone photographing. We have been playing Umuragni Generation, and we're going to discuss what it looks like when you take pictures, and it's like a jet set radio sort of location, but perhaps things are more than what they seem. Who's to say? I am joined, as always, by Pete Busby.
Hey. Excited to talk about this game. Very interesting one for multiple reasons. Probably the best photography game since Pokemon Snap that I've played. So this week's fun fact comes from Planet Earth 2. So you know it's legit.
Wait, the second Planet Earth? There's another one?
I don't know. According to the BBC, there is. The Planet Earth 2, this is from the BBC article, the Planet Earth 2 crew completed 117 shots in 40 different countries around the world. That's the title of the article. But regardless, so it's about Peregrine Falcons. Yes, I know. So apparently New York City has the highest concentration of nesting peregrines in the world. So they live on skyscrapers in the same way they would live on like cliff edges in their traditional habitat. And one reason they can do it is because there are always pigeons in New York. So they can just sort of cruise through the city on the updrafts that rise up between the skyscrapers and snatch pigeons at their leisure.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Both because I love Peregrine Falcons and their amazing eyesight, and also because, fuck pigeons.
I mean, if I had to pick a bird to rep between pigeons and Peregrine Falcons, it's a pretty obvious choice.
Yeah, though, pigeons are they're the bird of the people, I find. And so I'm a little bit upset at the idea of pigeons getting snatched. But if a bird needs to get snatched from New York City, I'm glad it's the pigeons and not the more fun wildlife that occasionally finds their way into New York City.
We have a surplus of pigeons. We'll do all right without a few.
Yes,
of them.
Clearly. If Peregrine Falcons can feast on pigeons and rats, I think New York will be better off in the long term. And we also are joined by a special guest. Unfortunately, M could not join us today. They had a bit of a scheduling conflict. So we're joined today by Too Mellow. Mellow, hello.
Hello.
Music master.
Hope to be someday a music master. But for now, I'm just a photography newbie.
Yeah, we could not, full disclosure on this, I was originally going to pick like a Jet Set Radio game, and I thought, hey, I know someone who's way into Jet Set Radio and probably would know which Jet Set Radio game to
And then
I
that person told you it's almost impossible to play Jet Set Radio Future, so you should play this instead.
Yeah, and you don't want to play Jet Set Radio despite the fact that it's on Steam, and it's almost impossible to play Jet Set Radio Future, so instead play this.
Yeah, I don't want Jet Set Radio to be, unfortunately it is, no matter what, but I don't want it to be like the main thrust of the series the way it is, because it's an older game and it's tough to play, and people will play that and say this is what all the fuss is about, and
yeah, I mean
that's what this podcast would be. 60% of this is what the fuss is about, and 40% I guess there's a little text here, but not that much yet.
Yeah, and I'm sure it would be a lot of like, I mean, we played a Tony Hawk game and that controlled pretty well. How come rollerblades control like garbage? But we don't need to do that because we played a different game where we're taking cool pictures and hanging out with our friends and getting fisheye lenses.
Oh, the fisheye lens.
That's
so
a game
good.
breaker. The fisheye
I
lens.
understand why those were so popular. So obviously they help you complete all the objectives.
Yeah, because it makes it taking pictures with a lot of content in it way easier. Though I really, I wish I could get lower to the ground so I could take fisheye lens shots of the skateboards, which up until this game, that's all I thought you could take pictures with fisheye lenses of, was skateboards.
They're the best lenses. Like, I defy you to name a cooler, more edgy lens than the fisheye.
I mean, I would have to know the name of a different kind of lens.
That is also true.
Yeah, I know three. That's true. I know the standard lens, the telegraphic
Telephoto.
That's the one. The telepathic lens,
Sniper lens.
the wide-angle lens, and the fisheye lens. Those are the 4 canonical lenses.
I think so.
I guess.
My uncle actually owned a camera shop back in the day. I learned nothing about cameras, but they had this giant tube that when you open it just dispensed packing peanuts. I thought it was the coolest damn thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. It was basically infinite packing peanuts.
What?
Yeah, it was this huge like a net almost that extended to the ceiling, and I guess they loaded the top of it, which is a shit ton of packing peanuts, and then went through this tube when they were filling packages.
I guess that makes sense. I never thought about it before.
Yeah, like how they got in the box.
They're not gonna individually rip open bags of them and do it like popcorn.
No, how they got them.
Thing.
I have no idea. It was really cool though.
That sounds awesome. A child version of me would really enjoy just
Oh.
spraying packing peanuts everywhere.
Oh, that would be infuriating. They're so hard to pick up.
They are, but sometimes they get static cling and they're just stuck to you forever.
That's why they're hard.
Well, before we get into Umuragni Generation, we've got our housekeeping as per usual. First off, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections and Deep Listens Podcast at gmail.com. We do not have any emails or comments to go over today. We did get a comment on Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within the movie, but we will save responding to that comment for a Final Fantasy podcast. So you can look forward to that during the FF11 pod. Someone had a strong opinion on The Spirits Within, and I didn't know that those people existed. We'll get to that. Because M is not here, allow me to get to the Discord report. Discord report. This week on the community Discord, which you can get access to via supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/deeplistens. We've had a lot of folks just discussing Final Fantasy XI because we had a good number of people in the community join us in trying to get into that game. And Mello, you've heard me discuss this game a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds charming, but not like an actual product I would want.
No one should intentionally try to get into. We'll get to it in the podcast, but man, that game sure did get made in 2002. So yeah, we've been trying to get through that. A lot of people complaining about that. I'm trying to get rid of a Joe Johnson bobblehead. Pete, do you want a Joe Johnson bobblehead?
Do I want a Joe Johnson bobblehead? I mean, yeah, I do. I think.
If you, listener, would like a Joe Johnson bobblehead, write into the show. I found an extra one, and now I need to not have it in my home.
Very nice. I mean, he's hands down the greatest player in the history of the Big Three. And I mean, that's saying something.
By a lot.
Not even close.
It's amazing. It's like he's a real basketball player still, and he was playing against a bunch of washed people. It's great. Is he back in the NBA now? No, right?
He was this season, I think. Okay. He definitely came back after a stint in the Big Three.
Yes.
Whether he currently is, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see if he gets put into the Orlando Dome. And at some point, I'm sure we'll have to actually discuss what the heck is going on with the NBA now, because there is apparently going to be basketball. It's
chaos.
It is chaos. It's bedlam. They're going to quarantine all of Orlando, and it's just going to all be tall people. But until then, that's what's going on in the Discord report. Just a reminder, the current protests and marches have not stopped. Just like the last few podcasts, I'm going to remind you that you should do like this show did and donate some money to the Trans Women of Color Collective. That is the charity that we have been supporting. You can do so at twocc.us/donate. Help out. You know, the current push to support Black creatives more directly is something that we feel very strongly about. So people should have been doing this the whole time, but hey, better late than ever. So help out if you can. Now, I think it's time for me to do my obsession. And Pete, let me tell you,
yeah,
my current obsession, because it's currently, it's Pride Month, so I have been trying to up my intake of queer content. I was watching She-Ra earlier, and I was pulled into. Have you heard of the name of the show? Is We're Here?
We're Here. No, I have not. What is it?
Yeah, it is an HBO show that stars two people who won RuPaul's Drag Race and one person who came in second.
Big fan of RuPaul's Drag Race.
So it's Shangela, Bob the Drag Queen, and Eureka are the three drag queens in question. And they basically go around through a bunch of different, just kind of small towns that do not have big queer scenes. And they come in, meet a few people who are aspiring drag queens, give them some coaching, and put on a big show in their small towns to basically say, hey, look, you might have thought you were alone in this town. You are not, in fact. So we're going to put on a show. We're going to help these people kind of deal with whatever they are dealing with and put on a show and kind of come into their own. And I will say I didn't know how do I put it? Like, they are trying to help people. The problems that the people that they are interacting with are dealing with. Some people are not necessarily dealing with big internal struggles. Some people are just allies and they want to help. Some people want to do drag just because they want to do drag, like they're living their lives openly and proudly, but they've always wanted to do this and didn't have the training. But whatever the person is dealing with, ultimately the solution will be doing drag. And I didn't know how I would feel about that, just because, I don't believe that there's one solution to all problems and that, one form of expression is correct for everyone. But all the people in the show did a great job. Like the three hosts, Bob the Drag Queen, Shangela, and Eureka, all do great jobs. And the shows that they put on are all outstanding. I really want to know who the heck the costume designers are for this show, because they are incredible. Like the stuff they turn around in like a week is outstanding. So I definitely recommend it. The show only has 6 episodes because when they were filming the 6th episode, COVID hit and they couldn't do shows in tight spaces with folks anymore. So the 6th episode is kind of a montage and kind of some background on the hosts. But the show is very, very good. I definitely recommend it. They're hour-long episodes. They hit towns like, they hit Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. They hit Ruston, Louisiana, Farmington, New Mexico, Branson, Missouri, Twin Falls, Idaho, and they were going to be in Spartanburg, and then that's like where the episode kind of jumps to everyone's working from home. But all the episodes are very good. I recommend most of them. Like, the shows that they put on are great. The hosts are really good. They get to people's kind of core emotional states in a way that I didn't expect the show to. And I definitely, if you have to watch just one episode, I think the Farmington, New Mexico episode is outstanding. But yeah, that's what I've been watching. I watched the whole series. It's a very good time. I'm also dreading. Pete, have you watched any of the new Watchmen or at Mello? Either of you watched the Watchmen show on HBO?
No. I mean, I haven't had HBO, so I haven't gotten a chance to.
I got HBO for like Barry and Chernobyl, and then saw that Watchmen was coming and was like, I'll cancel it.
That's fair. I only have it because Hulu has briefly made Watchmen available on Hulu. Huh. And that show, I was dreading it for a bit because the first scene of the first episode is rough. And so I don't know that I'm going to watch much more, but that show, at least at the very beginning, grabbed my attention. So we'll see. Maybe it'll get an Obsession shout out in a following week, but We're Here. 0 barrier to entry. Very fun. Recommend it. You'll get some tears. You'll get some laughs. You'll get some.
Regina King's great.
Yes.
If I ever watch it, it'll be for that.
She is very good. She's very good in the show, in the episodes I've seen. So yeah, watch We're Here. Give it a shot. So without further ado, let's get into Umuragni Generation. Pete, why don't you set the table? What is Umuragni Generation?
Yeah, sure. So it's It's sort of like a hybrid platformer first-person shooter, but instead of shooting guns, you're shooting pictures. So you play a photographer who's sent out into the world to capture certain shots in these various urban locales, and sort of as you go through these different areas, you find various things that are sort of varying levels of catastrophic or untoward are going on in this environment. So it's not key to the narrative, but you're piecing together this sort of larger social situation as you capture specific images to make more money, get cooler equipment, and snap cool pictures. Make sense?
Yeah, and this is made by Origami Digital. Came out in May, so this is a very recent release. And I would describe it as kind of like Jet Set Radio plus Pokemon Snap is kind of the elevator pitch. And I think it nails both of those elements. It's a much better photography game than Pokemon Snap, no offense. And I think it nails the Jet Set Radio aesthetic in a lot of ways, like down to the music, the art design, the cell shading. A lot of that stuff comes together really nicely. They basically created a bunch of little, almost dioramas, these little still pieces that you're wandering around in, seeing all the cool text written on the wall, the graffiti, characters doing sweet inline skating and skateboard tricks, and just kind of generally alternating between partying and being terrified. That's what I would say.
Yeah. It is literally one dev and one musician. And I gotta say, the fact that the gameplay and art are both so good is really impressive.
Yeah, I was impressed with how much original content there was. There are only a few character models that repeat. There are only a few pieces of art that repeat. But many of the environments, I think you only go into, there's 2 environments that have some overlap, but they are same place in different periods of time, but they could not look more different when you go back to them. So even then, there's not very much recycling. So I think that this game really pulls a lot together with sparse team, you know?
Yeah, and I found, basically, as you go into each area, you're tasked with a number of goals. There are goals that you have to achieve to proceed to the next level, and there are bonus goals, a lot of which are pretty similar every time, just like amounts of things will change maybe. And there's film canisters hidden about the levels, but as far as I can tell, you don't have like ammunition the way you do in Pokemon Snap of like a limit of things or film.
There is a limit. I never hit it. It says
that
there
is.
You have 24. You have 24 pictures that you can take at a time, but every time you find a film canister, it replenishes you.
Okay.
So if
so they actually are.
Yeah, if you quick snatch all of the film canisters, then you're limited at 24. And you don't, from what I could tell, I never ran out. I never tried running it down to 0. It seems like if you grab all of them and then there's no more in the environment, you'll run out of pictures when you get to 0. But otherwise, if you just space out your photography with your pickups, you'll never run out of photos.
The game is relatively short, and like, I guess the way I like to describe these kinds of games is like high content, low playtime, which is like my favorite combination of things ever. Is just have a lot of new content surprising around every corner, but be relatively easy to finish. And you can a little more than double that playtime by like going in to get all the different bonuses and stuff. And I like couldn't see myself not doing that. I usually don't do that for games, but I just wanted to be in this world longer.
Yeah, and it's very dense with information, like the amount of graffiti, the amount of posters. The spaces themselves maybe take 10 minutes to get your bearing in if you want to like find absolutely everything. But in that amount of time, you get a real sense of what this world is, who these people are, what's going on in every single one of these scenes. And I found that was the most enjoyable part, just kind of walking around exploring, and the game's prompts for what you're supposed to take pictures of really incentivize you to do that. There's only a few times where I was really just staring, trying to find the exact thing I need to take a picture of. Usually you naturally find those things as long as you've just got it in your head. Like, okay, I need to find a picture of a butterfly. I need to find a kiwi. I need to find 7 birds, right? Some of the time the question is, where can I find the thing I need to take the picture of? Sometimes it's, where can I stand to get these things that are clearly visible all in the frame at once? And then there's sometimes where it's kind of like a puzzle, like how can I even take a picture of that at all?
Yeah, and there are some that require a particular lens to take the picture. Sometimes it's just like clearly incentivizing you to try the lens, but especially for the telephoto pictures, it's clearly like making it difficult for you to get this. Like you're gonna have to stand somewhere really weird.
The telephotos are like, okay, we need you to get 10 of these things, but they're so far, they're spread out. How am I going to do it? And it usually means get as far away from these things as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really enjoyed just like the first level that jumps you in, and maybe Pete or Mello, did you play the tutorial?
I played it, yeah.
I at least went through it.
Does the tutorial give you, does it start in any of the existing levels, or is it a separate level?
Oh, it's just a menu with like a presentation by a little character about the game systems. Okay,
do they get into any of the story, or?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's strictly mechanics with a focus on basically what makes a good picture and the sort of editing menu you'll have eventually.
Okay. But I did mention before the show that at the very end of the tutorial, the last thing they tell you with zero explanation is don't take pictures of blue bottles, which are these little squids that are put around the environment.
Yeah, I found that out the hard way, and I was like, okay, that's a cool...
You get penalized a little bit.
You lose some money if you take pictures of them. So what does the game say makes a good photo? Just having a lot of stuff? That's what it seemed to be to me. Have the most stuff in your picture.
There's like, oh man, I wish I could remember. There's basically 3 things you have to deal with. And it's composition, so like having a lot of stuff, cool action shots, and then you get bonus points for taking pictures of your mates. So if you have a lot of your friends in the photo too. Okay,
so it's Pokemon Snap rules. The more stuff is in your photo,
composition, mood, and action, maybe, are the 3. Because that's how your pictures are described right after you take them, with like 3 adjectives, basically.
Yeah, I think mood is the one I was forgetting there. So like sort of the color combos, I think was mostly that one.
Yeah, you get to, it's really satisfying to just take the pictures alone, I think, because you take the picture, you're then frozen into a menu where you can make adjustments to it and then save it. And after you save it, the character kind of winds the camera. It's a satisfying little touch.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the fact that this game actually has a timer when you're playing in the levels proper, like a 10-minute timer that it encourages you to get all of the shots that the game prompts in less than 10 minutes, because one of your bonus goals is always finish in the allotted time. So if you're coming in and you're expecting to really try to jam in everything, all the main objectives and the bonus objectives in the 10-minute time period, you wouldn't want to fiddle around with editing the photos if the timer ran while you were editing the photos, but they wisely paused everything while you're messing around with your pictures. So getting your style right is never a detriment. You can always put your filters on. You can always play around with the color comp, the contrast. You eventually get a pretty wide number of photo editing tools, which is cool. Yeah, as someone who studied a little bit of image processing, like all the different algorithms that they let you run on your pictures are all super cool. Like the contrast filter is probably my favorite.
If you complete every objective in a level, you get either an upgrade to an existing thing you have or a brand new ability. I haven't gotten all of them yet, but there's one that lets you cancel out the camera winding animation and take faster pictures. There are some that I think let you add a lens flare or like special flares on the existing lens. And I've heard there are some like very sci-fi conceptual ones that I haven't gotten yet. And I think the ideal way to play the game would probably be to go through the environments, enjoy them, take your time, find what you can and just go through the story. Don't stop at every level and like try to 100% it. And then if you feel like it, come back later and explore everything. Try to get everything within that time limit. It is rather hard. Like you pretty much have to remember where stuff is to do it in that under 10-minute run. But I usually found myself finishing stages in like 5 or 6 minutes when I knew where everything was.
Yeah, I feel like, speaking of this and just the fact that you can cancel out the winding animation, I feel like this is the sort of game that's going to have a long future in speedruns. Just sort of matching out where you're going to stand. I already saw some up on YouTube just looking through them.
I actually used a speedrun to find like 2 things that I could not find.
Yeah, you can already see people mapping out like, okay, here's the best place to stand where I can just pivot and get as many of the photos at once as I can.
Yeah, and I definitely had certain times where I thought I was near where the picture should be, but I did not see all of the things that I needed in the frame. So I was just shooting my shot, hoping that the game would say, good enough. And it definitely did a couple times. Like there were a couple of photos where I was supposed to have with like a telephoto lens 5 different things. And I'm like, well, I think I maybe have the corner of one. Maybe. We'll see what the game says. And usually if you're close enough, the game will just give it to you, which is, I think, pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very like not fiddly at all. I found there's only one that I have trouble with every time I play. In the train level, there's a red light blinking on and off that you have to get, and I really cannot figure out what exactly you do. But I get it every time eventually, but it's tense. I kind of just feel like I'm taking a picture of this red light.
My understanding, at least when I finally got it, was that the red light blinking needs to be very close to you. Like there are some objects and some phrases that even if you had like a telephoto lens from far away, the game actually wants you to get close to the thing in question.
That's interesting because that is a thing in photography, to be actually close to something versus letting the lens get you close to it.
Yeah, and
so it's interesting that it does that, although in that one case it does lead to weird gameplay.
Yeah, I think it was just that some of the symbols in the menu when it tells you like what are your objectives, it seems like some of them seem to mean that you need to be close to this or you need to do something specific. Maybe it was in the tutorial, like the magnifying glass means you need to be physically close to this. And
I'll say honestly, the tutorial maybe overplays that stuff a little bit because I found it to obviously the screen in the game when you pause and look at your goals, it just tells you exactly what those symbols mean right there. So that's helpful. But I have to say, when I was doing the tutorial, I was like, gosh, I'm never going to remember these 7 symbols. Then it turns out it's totally fine.
Yeah, they give you a nice key kind of on the right-hand side of the screen.
That first level is just a fantastic space to start in.
So the first level, which is Mau View.
Yeah.
It's a rooftop party, basically, where you and your friends are hanging out by a pool. I would say that the roof has seen better days. Like there are fences that are clearly supposed to prevent you from falling off the roof that are knocked down in spots, and you actually use that to platform around the roof, which is kind of cool, and get some of the angles that you want. But I think that the game does a pretty good job of using that first level to introduce you to a bunch of the conceits without having to really tutorialize you that heavily. Like I discovered the double jump pretty quickly just because I kept running up to things and being like, how the hell do I get up there? My single jump is not doing it. I can't, there's no ledge for me to jump to. And then boom, boom, double jump. And I like that the game doesn't explain why you have a double jump. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. The game is so vertical in a way that is like not frustrating. In a Tony Hawk game, you usually have to do some work to get up to, even in Jet Set Radio, you have to do some work to get up to a roof or like the higher area. And for me, it's very nerve-wracking when I'm up there because I'm like, why it took so long to get here? I need to finish everything up here because if I fall, I'm going to be so annoyed. But in Umurangi, there's always multiple ways up and they kind of interconnect. So it works out. And I think that first level is really good at showing you that areas can have like 3 or 4 levels of depth in front or backs. Like you really have to get all the way around a structure.
Definitely. And I like that because of the density of the levels, even if you fall off of a space, like you said, there are multiple ways up back to wherever you were. So the punishment isn't that bad. Like there's usually something cool wherever you fell. And then on top of that, there's usually 2 ways that are pretty obvious to get back where you were. So you're never losing more than like 10, 15 seconds falling from the highest point in a level, which I think is important if you're going to have a timer. I questioned the presence of the timer, at least in the first few levels, when I was first playing the game, because when I have a timer, I want to get underneath it, right? That's what a timer kind of prompts you towards. And if you're going to have a 10-minute running clock, I'm going to want to get in as fast as possible, assuming that there's going to be some sort of reward. And because the game has these dual layers of kind of the required tasks and then the bonuses, I was usually feeling like I wanted to get in under the timer rather than do the bonuses, especially because one of the bonuses was always get in under the timer. So if I wasn't going to get in under the timer anyway, there was no reason to do any of the other bonus content. So I kind of wish that the game, maybe even if you hide the bonuses to start or something like that, just because exploring the space is so central to the game. Like I felt that the exploration and the tone and the music, all of that stuff was what drew me to this game overall and what really worked for me. And so having this timer, this little thing on your shoulder, just going, hey, maybe you should take the pictures faster, get through this, just go. Even if it's not something that the game doesn't force you, there's actually like no penalty for overrunning the time.
No.
Like you get maybe slightly less money, and even then the money barely matters.
Yeah. You don't actually buy anything in the game. It's just like kind of a generic video game score.
Yeah, and it's only useful for one of the bonus tasks in each level is like get over X dollars. But you always get money for every picture you take. So as long as you're taking pictures that aren't just of a blank wall, you'll eventually clear that dollar amount without trying.
Like when you get the wide angle lens or the fisheye lens, whoever is paying you loves that thing. So you take a picture of anything, they'll be like, hey, $10.
15. Look at how many
at some
colors
point
there
it becomes
are.
impossible to miss that money count. But I think actually, hopefully this podcast will help people because I listened to a podcast about this game before playing it, and kind of got the whole deal on the timer, got the whole pitch for how it actually interacts with the gameplay. And that helped me go in thinking, okay, fuck the timer. That aided me a ton.
You definitely don't need to care about it. Maybe, and when you go back to the levels later on in the game, if you want to replay level 1, level 2, level 3, all of those unlocked lenses and unlocked editing features will carry over. So if you were having trouble nailing getting 7 birds in one picture in a quick fashion, the wide angle lens makes that, or the fisheye, both of those make that trivial. So there's definitely
everything
a bunch
you
of
get
levels.
just makes it even better.
Yeah, they'll get much easier. So ignore the timer your first time through most of these levels and just kind of enjoy the space, enjoy the setting, because using the camera to zoom in on posters to read the content or, looking at some of the graffiti close up, seeing what's going on kind of in the distance, I think all of those things are the most compelling parts of this game, and losing that for the sake of, getting a high score is kind of secondary. Like, do that stuff when you've run out of content in the regular flow of the game.
So there is one big thing in this game that I think is impossible to ignore, and that's the fact that you have an adorable penguin friend.
I was about to ask, who did y'all realize that the penguin was one of your friends?
Pen, sure, he's my dude.
The first time I did not. In the first level, I was like, why is this happening? And then the penguin came along to the next one. I was like, oh shit, of course.
Yeah, the game tells you as one of the bonus tasks, take a picture of all of your friends. And that's a recurring thing in the game, is that you need to take a picture with all your friends. And I kept taking pictures of the 3 humans who seemed to be my friends, and I could tell they were my friends because if I pointed at them, I snapped and pointed at them, they made a cool pose.
Yeah. Penguin does not do that.
Penguin does not do that. And
not having it.
Penguin, you needed to be like in a really weird spot to get penguin plus friends all in the same picture. But yeah, I love the penguin.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly enough.
I love this group of friends as well.
Just a group.
Yeah.
The Penguin gave me a Neon Genesis Evangelion sort of vibe.
I would
whole
say it's
game.
not the only thing.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
want to
that's
give people
true.
the wrong impression
Good
because I
point.
know that series has a lot of baggage, but some of the surface cool elements of Evangelion are present in this game.
Yeah, the parts of Evangelion that I like are present in this
Yeah.
game, and the parts of Evangelion that I don't like are completely missing, which is awesome.
It is very much like, don't ask any questions why these people have a penguin. It just is what it is. Kind of like Masato.
Yeah, I've got to also say, well, Pen Pen, I think, is a rockhopper penguin. I enjoyed that Umurangi Generation gave the chin strap penguin some love. It's an underrepresented penguin, and they're adorable, like all penguins, but they're adorable little chin strap. They don't shave, or they shave real nice. So yeah, I really enjoyed the first level. You're jumping around. It really gets a sense of the setting. And I didn't do the tutorial, so I didn't know about the don't take pictures of blue bottles for a bit.
Mhm.
But one of the most obvious places to take a picture, the game asks you to find the word mix and take a picture of that. And there's a mixtape that says mix on it, and there's a blue bottle like right in front of it. And I ran into that organically just because of that placement. And
Nice.
on subsequent playthroughs, I had to figure out, okay, maybe I need to lean a little bit so that I can crop this thing out of the picture. And I think the second level gives you a little bit more of a sense of what the heck's going on with those squid, jellyfish-looking thing.
Yeah.
The second level is Otomoetai,
Mhm.
and it's kind of a UN barracks, it looks like.
Yeah, it's immediately morose and rainy and moody. And you have tons of soldiers.
Yeah, lots of soldiers. There's target practice with things that look like demons as the targets, which I was like, that's a little weird. There was a RPG, not an RPG, a mortar named Sharky that had a kill count that said how many jellyfish it killed. There was a big jellyfish drawn on the wall, a lot of skulls with knives, and people saying, like, I wanted to have a life, but instead I joined the UN.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I'm like, okay, there's something going on here. Because the first level, there's not much showing that it's apocalyptic other than this roof seems a little bit abandoned, right?
Yeah.
The second level is like, okay, there's clearly a war, and there's some sections where, like, there's a UN checkpoint, and it seems like maybe someone's going to stop you. Like, everyone's packing heat except your crew. Once you get to the third level, let me try and pronounce this.
Kati Kati?
Karangahake? Oh, no. It's Walled City. Walled City is the next level.
Yeah, it's much easier to pronounce.
Yeah, the Walled City, that's where you get gamer all over the place.
Oh, I think that's the fourth level.
Oh,
the
Strand?
third one is, the Strand is the fourth level. The third one is Kati Kati. It's kind of the Walled, I think that would be like the Walled City level. It's very like pinkish red and has a lot of memorials of people who passed away.
Right. Yeah. There's one that says like Max was a savior who protected us.
Max was one of us.
Yep. Walled City and the Strand. Walled City is definitely a lot more morose than the Strand, but both of those levels kind of have that high contrast. Lots of neon, a lot of kids milling around, kind of partying in both of those locations. And you kind of get the feel of this young nightlife that's going on, kind of contrasted with Otomoetai. And then once you get to Contact, which I think is the hard break in this game, because up until that point, you're kind of in the grimy future, your Blade Runner future. Just neon
it's all
everywhere.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah, you're cyberpunk. You got gamers all over the place. People wearing VR goggles with mohawks.
Going from the Strand to Contact is a pretty big moment.
Yeah, so this is a fairly new game. We're going to talk about all of it, but like I recommend that you play it. The stuff that we're talking about is better experienced by playing.
Oh yeah.
The game is real cheap.
Game is visual.
It's also very visual, and all of these things that we're mentioning, the story's definitely better experience through the lens of the camera. So if you don't want any spoilers for stuff that's going on in the later part of the game, maybe just go buy it and then come back. But
no voice acting, just straight up, you can read text on posters and stuff, and you can read graffiti, and then you can just see what is right in front of your eyes.
yeah, the game is $14.99 right now on Steam, and there's also a free demo, so definitely check it out. It just came out.
Demos are
but
back.
They are. I can't believe it. Now, if only this demo disc came with some sort of other game as a tie-in, that we could get them really back. But Contact is the level that kind of sold this game to me. I liked the aesthetics of the first levels, but once you get to Contact, you're basically back in Otomoetai, that location, except it's now on fire. All of the fire points that you saw, like Sharky, the mortar, there was a kind of a set of cover where people are just kind of smoking before. Now there are people laying down fire. Your crew is there doing medical work. Like there's a wounded person and one of your crew members is trying to help them. Some of the other members of your crew just have guns now. Pen hanging out.
Yeah.
Just being cool.
Nothing happens to the penguin.
Penguin's just taking it all in stride. He's very chill. He's a rock hopper penguin. He's a chinstrap penguin, so he's very cool. But at this point, we see kind of in flashes of muzzle flares from the guns that there are gigantic jellyfish / squid monsters descending upon this location that your crew is holding down. There are corpses of dead jellyfish squid monsters all over the place. And this location that actually was fairly large and vertical in the first walkthrough is now very cramped because you were surrounded on all sides by fire and deadly, deadly water.
Debris.
Jellyfish.
There's a crashed plane.
Yeah.
A lot has happened.
Out of the sky. Jellyfish, good pick too. I mean, just based on the way they're overtaking the world's oceans. Like we ourselves are already pretty close to a jellyfish Armageddon at this point.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Umurangi is that you never really see them do anything malicious. They're just kind of approaching, or they're around, or their bodies take up space and shock you. But you don't ever see them being malicious.
Yeah, they don't seem to be intelligent.
They're just there.
Yeah, they are slowly encroaching on this world, and you get the sense that there's these giant walls surrounding this city, and you see the giant UN walls, like, do not cross, but you never get the sense that the fight is against anything other than nature, that humanity's just kind of been encroached on, maybe through the slow march of time. You see almost all of the posters in the game that kind of outline threats talk about parasites, they talk about squids, they talk about abandoning the earth, but they don't necessarily say, a giant war happened. Like,
I do know a little bit about this from talking to the creator and seeing certain posters in the game, but essentially what happened is the people in the world were drilling into ice, and they kind of got to a point of no return with destroying a piece of the environment, and it caused these creatures to kind of wake up and come out.
Okay, because I saw posters and news clippings talking about nuking the jellyfish or nuking the squids, and I saw a poster that talked about brain parasites. Like if you were feeling lethargic, don't go near anyone.
There is, I think in the 6th stage, yes. I think the biggest one, you suddenly see people wearing masks and having to go through security checkpoints and being checked out. And it's because there is this rumor or something of the jellyfish also causing a disease that's communicable.
Yeah, we see a bunch of punk rock looking dudes who, some of them are wiling out and acting all crazy, and then there are some people who are just lying down on the ground for no real reason. I'm like, this seems like a bad place. Yeah,
there's a lot of VR people who are just completely in it and tuned out. It's they're very slim VR helmets that basically look like sunglasses or goggles. So with the style that a lot of the characters in the game have, it can be hard to realize that they're VR. But around the Gamer's Palace,
yes,
there's a lot of people underground in the passageways just kind of conked out on their VR and tuned out of it all. And they look rough.
Yeah, and I think that's the Strand where you just see It says at one point, one of the goals is to take a picture of like 10 signs that say gamer on it.
Yeah, 7 instances of the word gamer.
Yeah, and I thought for a second, oh, that sounds like it might be hard. Like, how are we going to get so many? And almost every single sign, every neon sign in that level says gamer somewhere.
Yeah, ultimate escapism zone for pleasure. And there's a sign that says, I played first-person shooters in the 90s and I won't shut up about it.
I didn't see that one.
Nice.
Yeah, this game definitely is incredibly online in some spots.
Oh, yeah.
The giant gamer spot, I found a poster that was for some sort of tanuki. It was like, protect our tanukis, and then the sub-caption underneath it said, wait, that's a picture of a red panda. And it was a red panda picture.
Oh, my gosh.
So there are a ton of little things like that. Some of the art in places feels very online. But overall, I think that the aesthetic blends well because almost all the characters you see in this game are feel like they're teens, maybe young 20s.
Yeah, they're
Almost
definitely
everyone seems to
street
be young.
youths.
Yes, definitely street youths. And you see posters here and there all over the place that kind of speak to the fact that some people seem to have been able to leave the planet. There are posters talking about learn Korean or learn Japanese. It's the language of the future in space. Talking about how you can get on a ship to Mars and you're going to be able to, take part in the far-flung future of human society. But it's very clear that all of the characters here are not in space. So it's unclear if they've been left behind. Maybe the ships that launched maybe the launch never happened. Some of these posters seem to just be escapist movies, whereas others seem to be real ads for actual products. And it was hard to discern the two. Did y'all find that as well?
Between like real products and absurdist fantasy?
Yeah, because there were some posters that are like, American Sniper Man. 3 CIA agents, 2 Marines, and 5 soldiers fought against 20 protesters, and now they're retired and mad.
Like, the Last Liberal.
Yes.
It's a great one.
A lot of posters like that, but then there were also posters like, hey, gamer den, hang out here.
There's the ones that, various things in this game that got me, living in the time we're living in right now, was the one that's like tired of all the noise. You can just soundproof your house. You don't have to worry about anything that's going on in the outside world. Or like live on a boat.
Yeah. Learn a language because there'll be a future. Don't worry about it. It's going to be so useful in your future to know Japanese or Korean. Please pay us.
I think there was one about, hey, you can still have a vacation right now. Don't worry about it.
That's awesome. Pete, was there a favorite poster of yours that you found?
I mean, these were all pretty good. I mean, the obvious one that just sort of like resonated. I wish I had written down the exact phrasing, but when you have to take a picture of the word cops and it's sort of embedded in this, the cops are killing us message.
Yeah.
I mean, grim. It does there were much more funnier, upbeat posters than that, but that's sort of, the obviously most timely one.
Yeah, and there were a bunch of sections where it wanted you to find like cops or like a single word contained in a phrase. And I would often try to take a picture of the whole phrase and they're like, no, because it's taken out of context when it's given to you in the prompt for what you need to take a picture of. So it allowed the developers to embed, you're searching for a singular word, but they're almost always embedded in a larger sentence. And it forces you to take in the entire message when all you think that you're looking for is a single word or
Sure.
numbers.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it goes the other way, interestingly, too, though. Like, there's this sort of larger message here, and yet you're going for a purely aesthetic function here when you reduce it just to a single image of cops. Like, it's no longer a message. It's just a cool photograph when you zoom that far in.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It definitely makes you find the full phrase and then, in many ways, just take it completely out of context to get your points. But I think that that's actually part of the message, right? Like, there's this overall message that's being broadcast often in the graffiti or in the iconography, But in order to have the version that is fit for sale, you need to remove all of the problematic context and just give this version that is the most sanitized version possible.
Yeah, there's a distinct break between message and content. Like, you think certain people are relaying a message, but no, it's just more aggregation of content.
Mm-hmm. You immediately, at one point, I think it's with Cops Come Here to Kill Us, get the sense that, like, you are not being given these goals by the game. This is someone asking you to deliver these messages in these photos. For, I guess, the sense that I got was that they wanted to capture this generation. The title of the game means Red Sky Generation, which is what the kind of like last youths have called themselves, or have been called, like the last people to be, I guess, alive and young at this time before this end of the world. And it seems like whoever's requesting these photos wants to get their aesthetic, like their art, their street style, and like everything they do, hanging out with their friends in the like Taranga area, but without any of their actual struggle or hardship or sadness. Like they have you take a picture of the memorial itself, but not like who it's for.
Yeah, not who it's for, not any of the things that are occurring around it. They really want you to take a picture of this nice, pretty artwork.
5 American flags. Also.
Yes. Get 5 American
level.
flags.
So
you want to get a 2 and a 3. And it seemed to me that you're basically taking pictures for a patron who, like you mentioned, it's all stuff that kind of captures things about the aesthetic without any of the suffering. And it always omits whatever's going on in the circumstances around you. Your dossier.
Yeah.
If I can give a harsh read of Jet Set Radio itself, it would be that Jet Set Radio very rarely, the first game very rarely like shows the darkness that can be present behind its aesthetic, and like gentrification, until Future, where they take that stuff more head on. But comparing Umurangi to Jet Set Radio is almost kind of funny, because the person requesting these photos is in love with this aesthetic in a similar way.
Yes. They are in love with the aesthetic, and they don't necessarily want the bummer parts contained.
Yeah.
Like you're taking
you as the
pictures
player experience the gut punch that person never will, so it works out.
The whole notion of sort of aestheticizing or commodifying protest and sort of counterculture, I mean, has a long history within capitalism, just sort of as an impulse. Like there's this I don't know if it's very famous. There's this well-known book called The Conquest of Cool, which is all about how sort of corporate takeover of what had previously been a resistance to that exact idea of corporate takeover. I mean, it stretches back to the 1960s, probably even further than that, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's definitely on point. And I think the level Contact maybe had some of, I thought, the most explicit sort of moments where you're missing the point with some of the pictures you're taking. Like you take a picture, it asks you to take a picture of 2 carbines is one of the things. And the carbines, it says 2 carbines, but the only carbines that are being used are people shooting at giant monsters. And the picture is not to take of the soldiers. It's not to take a picture of the giant monsters that they're firing at. It says, get 2 guns. Or get 2 body bags, a picture of 2 body bags. Do we want to take a picture of this person who's bleeding out? No. Ignore them. Are we going to address the fact that there are 2 body bags here and maybe there are people in them? I don't really care if they're full or empty. Just get a picture of 2 body bags.
I think that level was like actively scary to me, because I think I was a bit lulled in by, well, especially the Strand right before that. It's just such a nice space to be. I was so comfortable, and then that level puts me in this area with these huge jellyfish. I have a terrible fear of sea creatures, apparently even when they're not in the sea. This is why I couldn't play Outer Wilds, and now it's getting to me in my Umurangi. But that area where the bottom of the level used to be, that is just nothing but the squid bodies, and the targets are somewhere in there.
Yes.
kind of zooming in on that with the telephoto lens and seeing all that just really creeped me out.
Yeah, they managed to make a largely passive creature look a lot more terrifying. And having that idea that the person that's asking you for pictures is asking in some ways for an escapist pastiche of what's going on, I think it made sense why you don't take pictures of blue bottles, because the blue bottles are a constant reminder of the threat that these people are under at all times, and they've clearly like covered and blanketed all of society at this point. There's not a level you go to without some of them at least present. So the person who is commissioning these photos clearly does not want to be reminded of the threat that they're under, and they will dock you money every time you take a picture of it.
The sort of explicitly like using your money as the score-keeping device is a pretty good reminder that all these sort of, I don't know, means of cultural discourse are embedded within what Adorno would call the culture industry. So, I mean, it's all these institutions of sort of money-making that have a pretty deep say over what we talk about. Like Edward Said, he's a post-colonial theorist. He talks about control over the discourse. So like who gets to say what about whom dictates a lot of power structures. So like knowledge is power, but not in the way the G.I. Joes wanted us to think. So like the idea that at a certain point, whatever photos you take, in order for them to be disseminated, they need to be acceptable to this larger financial structure, sort of reminds the limits of, I don't know, mass media, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that in many ways the most rebellious thing you could do in this game is take pictures of the things that the game doesn't ask you to. Like taking pictures of the blue bottles is the most rebellious thing you could possibly do. And it's almost a shame that you can't. Like I know that in the game's structure, you need to take pictures of the requested items so that you can advance to the next level. And, you know, it's not something that necessarily the game needs to support, but it would be cool if your character could be like, no, what people need to know about is my friends, these people. The stuff that's the bonus in many cases feels like the stuff you should be covering, like taking pictures of your friends, covering all of these different people out in the streets, the monsters that are coming, the blue bottles everywhere. That's kind of capturing the lived reality of these people. And I wish that you could maybe just brute force your way. Just keep taking pictures of blue bottles until the game's like, oh, you want to be that kind of guy. And then you're a war photographer or something. Instead of always having to be at the end of the day, you've got your deadline and you've got your assignment and you can't deviate from it, even if the game is yelling at you, hey, the shit you're doing is bullshit. That's not the whole point. Like this society is crumbling. That's the real problem. And I wish you could blend the pop photography with some more almost journalistic photography, but I like that the game gives you the space to play in that. It doesn't force you to do it, but you can kind of be almost like a war correspondent, especially in like the levels like Contact, the level immediately after Contact. I'm going to try this again. Karangahake, I think it's the subway level where you're on the train.
Mm-hmm.
And that level also kind of fucks me up.
Yeah, the guy, I was going to mention the other most shocking image in the game to me is the guy whose face is just covered in blood and he's just smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
And kind of staring dead into the distance.
Yeah, and that was like seeing them, I assume that that's just like jellyfish burns. Because it starts on the head and there's like a band on the arm and it looked like, you know, you laid something across this person.
Mm.
And it was at that moment where I saw their helmets that they didn't say UN, like someone drew an F in front of the UN, so the helmet said fun. And it became clear to me that these people probably aren't UN soldiers. They're not government affiliated. They're just young people like everyone else who picked up the leftover equipment and started trying to defend themselves. Or at least that was my headcanon. I don't know if that's... In
the third level, what I assume is all the people who are memorialized in that third level must have taken UN equipment and fought back for themselves, and then the police use that as an excuse to come and kill them.
Yeah, and it becomes clear, I think, in those two levels, Contact and the one immediately following, that you and your crew are in some ways part of this resistance fighting back using repurposed equipment. And many of the spaces that you're moving around in have been carved out by the youth for the youth, using the abandoned tools of their predecessors.
Mm-hmm.
So any other levels that we want to talk about? I think like Invasion might be the most striking non-Neon Genesis Evangelion property that is mostly Evangelion.
Yeah, I just stared at everything in that one for a long time.
Yeah, they bring you back to Mau View. You get back to that roof, and there's just hell is all around you.
There's so many blue bottles in that level. It seems basically impossible to avoid taking pictures of them. But at the same time, it kind of looks like you set up to have the ultimate party. Like there's more boom boxes, there's couches and everything, and everybody's hanging out. But it just looks like it's about to go real bad.
Yeah, you're burning skateboards.
Mm-hmm.
It's gotten that bad. We're burning them instead of shredding.
Yeah, it feels kind of like the last party on Earth.
Yeah, and I mean, you're on a roof and you can see 4 giant robots launching missiles at what appears to be like Diamond Weapon or something from Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, it opens up on the mechs, and it's the first time you've seen anything like this. I don't think any posters even hint at there being mechs. So there's suddenly just these huge, like maybe there's something that the people didn't even know the military had until they came of use.
Yeah, I mean, there's the ruins of things that look like they could be creatures, they could be mechs, they could be anything almost. In that subway level we talked about before, like you alternate between going through a tunnel to then kind of going out over the sea, and you just see the corpses of monsters on both sides of you. But yeah, when you see, and it's cool because that level, the last proper level, I guess, it starts you in a corner, kind of the least interesting part of that rooftop to start. And if you just kind of walk in either direction and basically stop staring at the wall, which is kind of where it initially sets you, you just see that the sky is entirely red. There are silhouettes of giant robots firing missiles at the silhouette of some sort of giant creature as well. And I'm glad that at least in that last level, the game gives you a prompt to take a picture of 5 robots.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is
it's almost as if the person is like giving up and saying, "Okay, let's just go for it."
But even then, there are only 4 gigantic government robots, or 3, and then one's a piece of graffiti that counts.
Yeah. The really, like, especially striking vistas in that last level, in a way that, again, just really impresses me that this is all the work of a solo dev.
Yes. Yeah, and
just being able to set up these amazing, like, places where you just kind of want to look. And the game is, we should say, like, kind of lo-fi.
Yes.
It's impossible to, like, pin it on one style, but I would call it, like, a low-poly, kind of cartoonish game with a definite, like, low-resolution filter on it. So the things you're looking at aren't, like, full HD gamers style. But they are like very beautiful, and when you're looking at the game, you kind of start to see the world through that filter, and just, this is my world now.
Yeah, in many cases, I found that taking pictures of objects with a little bit of blur, like if you didn't zoom in and focus your camera properly, it helped mask some of the low poly assets. And in many cases, the photography elements let you create the environment that the game was clearly envisioning, even if the assets were not necessarily there to do that. Like, I found that the plane specifically, like that model, was very low resolution. I couldn't even necessarily tell it was a plane if I zoomed in on it, right? If you get real close to it, those textures are stretched. It can be a little bit hard to tell what's going on. But if I blurred it and was a little bit further away and played with some of the filters, all of a sudden it became very evocative. And I think that a lot of the best work that this game does is in silhouette. When you've just got a striking object in the distance set against oftentimes a black background or a red background, either a splash of color on a black background or a black object on a red background,
Yeah.
it's more striking than even the filters that you can apply.
I think you really see that with a lot of the neon work. Like, that's the nice thing about neon is it's sort of, even when you look at it in real life, it's got a little haze to it. So, like, it's striking enough that it can blend at the edges and still be super impactful with, like, a dark, nondescript background.
Yeah, and the game, I think, does its best in terms of, like, the sharpness of the assets. All of the graffiti and text, if you zoom in and, you know, make sure that your camera's in focus, all that is crisp. It's really the character models and the environmental art that gets a little bit fuzzy. And I don't know if it's just that some of the sections are low poly or if they actually have some cell shading on them, but in either case, they definitely are very evocative of the Jet Set Radio style that the game was clearly going for.
Yeah, I think the upper levels of the walled city area just kind of get very, very low texture quality, I guess, where it's just like, oh, this is just black blocks and stuff. But it's almost like Killer 7-like. As you get up there, it's like, well, you don't need to see what's up there because you can actually go to it. So it's just going to kind of be this like further area hanging over all the pictures you take. And it's even more evocative.
They saved the polygons and the processing for the stuff that mattered, and for the things that didn't, they just either made it black, made it out of focus, put fog, whatever they needed to do to hide the stuff that wasn't necessary, they did. And I think that focus allowed this game to be achievable with a team of the size. Like this game is right scoped. They did exactly what they needed to do with what they had and got in, got out. Like, it's an hour-long experience if you go mainline as fast as possible. Probably about an hour.
I could not do that. I had trouble finding things.
Like, tops. Like, I would say, like, the fastest you could do the first time if you don't know where everything is. Maybe it's like an hour, 2 hours. But even still, I think that there's way more content if you want to explore it. And that's really a testament to the design, that it doesn't waste any of your time. It just lets you experience things, and you can go back in if you want, but you'll get a very good experience if you just mainline it. So what did you make of kind of the final level? Because the final level breaks away from the structure of the earlier ones.
It's cool. Like, it's definitely interesting. You mean like the final one with the
the final one,
dragon monsters?
Yeah, final delivery.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. It's cool. It's barren. I mean, it tells you what to focus on, really.
It's ghosts. There are ghosts floating everywhere. You're in a crater. It's just Evangelion. There's like a giant robot hand or something behind you, and you're just like walking in the last remains of the earth, it would seem. And there's like ghost people in front of you. Like, there's little spirits floating away, and then there are blue ghostly figures and like ghost birds, and then there's a giant creature silhouetted across the moon. And man, nailed it. Great work, designers. Striking, evocative, really cool. And when you take your last picture on that last level, it just cuts to credits dynamically, which is so cool. And I actually went through that level twice. The first time I took the picture of the giant monster creature. The second time I took a picture of the people. Yeah. And whatever you take a picture of, that's kind of the last scene. But I like the idea of, like, there's this dichotomy between the brutal nature of these monsters, these naturalistic forces, and then kind of the ghosts of the society that's that has been eradicated. And both of these things are kind of put into dialogue with one another directly.
I tried to take pictures of both together, and you kind of can't because of the scale of the creature.
Yeah, it's
which is interesting.
It's a circumstance where you almost have to make an editorial decision in your last picture. Is it a picture of these monsters conquering over humans, or is it a picture of kind of this little flashing light of humanity? Which is cool. I actually really I love how this game uses framing, literal framing of pictures, to make statements like that.
Yeah, I think it was like a lot of games that don't know how to end will often make kind of just a surrealistic leap at the very ending. And a lot of that seems unearned to me,
Yes.
but this one I felt was just a perfect last view of this world and the last people who are going to inhabit it. And I almost took it as like a transportation to this literal spirit world or something.
Yeah. And I think that it's fitting after the level before it. Like, it makes sense that that was the last party.
Yeah.
And I think that the game, like, in the credits, the last, outside of, like, the credits telling everyone who worked on the game, there's one kind of piece of story contained in there that says that this game is dedicated to the Umuragni generation, the last generation that has to watch the world die. So the idea that at some point there's going to be a last generation, whoever it is, at some point there's going to be one. And this game kind of envisions what it's going to be like for those people, because they will exist at some point.
Yeah. And throughout you're seeing like essentially a day in their lives. You don't ever travel from location to location. The game automatically transports you between these levels, but it's very clearly like one very long day of like just seeing everything you could see in your area and then going back home, trying to make some money along the way. And it just happens to be the last day. So all the people you see either trying to get away and play some games, just hanging out, like dancing, celebrating life, doing art. All of these things you can't take off your mind, like what fate awaits them and how sad it is. So when that ending does hit, it hits pretty hard and it feels like, yeah, this is where this was going. It doesn't feel like a sudden departure or like, oh, why isn't it another traditional picture level? It's the perfect ending.
Yeah, it is definitely a game about witnessing the end of the world, not changing it, not fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
You are not an RPG protagonist. You are not going to summon Holy to stop this from happening. You are just going to be there to take pictures. And I think in many ways this game, this moment in the world where people are masking up to avoid disease, where open rebellion against the cops is occurring regularly, where it seems like it's a young generation that's in many cases been disregarded or left to fend for themselves, while other people in better spots have parachuted out and kind of left them to a sad, macabre fate. It rings very true.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to know how much of this game's creation, like, I don't know what the development cycle was on this game. And I don't know how much of the cultural context, because this game was made in New Zealand. It's a lot of the Maori words that are used are local to New Zealand. Like all of the locations are set in New Zealand as well. So I don't know how much of this was because the developers were on the pulse of the moment and how much of it was just happenstance. Like I can definitely believe that some of these elements, even if you weren't working on this game in early 2020, you probably would have still kept everything the same. But the way things have unfolded this year, I think made this game ring even more true than it would have otherwise.
Yeah, and I think it still feels like escapism because a lot of us can't go outside right now. I mean, or at least not in any normal capacity. So going around taking pictures of these locales, like I don't want the game to sound like too grim or like hopeless or like you can't look anywhere without getting reminded of something. It has both that and like this fun escapism of spending time with your friends in these areas that you haven't seen much like before.
I'm intrigued too by the decision, especially with sort of the timeliness of like photography as a means of social resistance. Like there's this guy, Saul Alinsky. He's a very famous community organizer, sort of big his first book was in the 40s and his next one was in the 60s. Second one was called Rules for Radicals. And he makes a whole point that any sort of attempt to organize people has to be embedded within the community. So like it needs to utilize the tools at their disposal. So I think he gives sort of a glib picture of nonviolent resistance. But his point is like, look, like these people engaged in nonviolent resistance because they didn't have any guns. All the guns were on the side of the existing power structure. So what other choice did they have? Now, I don't think that's the only reason nonviolent resistance sort of came into the picture. But I think it's interesting now in terms of like our modern proliferation of, you know, phones, cameras, pictures, Twitter, social media, all that stuff. Like, what do we have at our disposal now? It's publicity, it's awareness, it's documentation. So it's sort of interesting to say, like, all right, what's our greatest weapon at this point, and how can we leverage that in a modern community organization context? So,
Yeah,
like,
just to piggyback on what you just said, like I think that a lot of the inflection points in the latest protests that have hit the hardest is when someone caught a scene that people in power did not want exposed on camera. And when those moments have happened, be it in Buffalo with an older gentleman, 75-year-old, getting knocked down and having his skull cracked open, those moments getting caught on camera, just preventing people from denying reality, have been the moments that saw massive media coverage. It precipitated large scale, if not immediate change, at least calls to action in a way that politicians could not ignore. And I think that this game kind of capturing that even if the camera is not necessarily the best, you would prefer to have something other than a camera, but even just a camera can make, and I mean, in this game, it's not going to propagate change, but it does allow you to make a dramatic statement and in some ways find some joy in a grim situation. But in the real world, I think that those tools are being used in a way that is actually affecting change in a way that I didn't necessarily expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Just while we're on the subject of that Buffalo guy, that actually fits weirdly enough with Alinsky's tactical advice again. I mean, even this was 70 years ago. One of his key pieces of advice was like, look, you want to force the opposition to act and then document their reaction. Because what's going to make things worse for them is the way they react, not your original action. So, I mean, interesting. It's exactly what we're seeing, right? Like, protests certainly have their place. I'm not saying they're not effective, but like you mentioned, Gino, a lot of what we're seeing to be most impactful is just documenting reaction.
Yeah, it's not like nonviolent resistance is it's not that there will not be violence. It's that the people who are doing the nonviolent resistance are doing something that it might break a law, but it is not violent. So any violent response to that will be seen as an escalation. And
Exactly.
So you're basically prompting people to do something about you're sitting at a lunch counter that you're not supposed to sit at. And so what are we going to do about it? How are you going to, make a consequence for this rule breaking? Well, anything you do to move this person will involve physical contact. It will involve infringing on their space. And because authority does not like to be challenged, they will almost certainly take this nonviolent action as a threat several orders of magnitude beyond what it is facially. So anything they do, if you can record it, will kind of expose the inherent overreaches of the power structure. And I think that's what we've been seeing, for weeks now, is resistance, protest, oftentimes being met with just sheer violence in response. Yeah, so, I mean, sorry to get directly into what's going on, but I think that this game is kind of playing with this stuff very directly. And like Mello, like you were saying before, we don't want to give the impression that this game is entirely grim. Some of the moments that I enjoyed the most were taking some pictures that were not even centered around some of the more grandiose imagery in the game. I found that like the photo that I enjoyed the most taking and editing was one where it asked you to just take a picture of 3 ferns and a bench. And something about the lighting and the setting of the picture that I took, I actually spent a good amount of time playing around with the sliders, getting everything just right. And at the end of it, I just felt like, oh, wow, that's a really beautiful picture. I really like that one a lot. And the game inspires you, I think, with the tool set that it gives you to find those little moments of joy in what is a very grim environment. Because your character's verbs in this game are not shoot, they are jump, and they are take picture, and that's it. And, well, occasionally you can tell your friends to, bust a sweet move. But you're
Even
not
when
going
they
to be
look
able to...
like they really don't feel like it.
Yeah. I love when they are into it, that's cool. And then when they are self-conscious and like, okay, I guess I'll strike a pose, that's cool too.
It's like, I just performed like emergency medical assistance, but I guess I'll pose for you on this train.
I'm really not feeling it, but okay. So yeah, I think that's all I've got for Umurangi Generation. Is there anything that we haven't touched on?
No.
The soundtrack.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. We have an expert. What do you think?
Well, I really, really love it, and how much there is of it is like astounding to me. Every level would have between like a 10 or 15 minute loop of songs, which is pretty impressive, in the variety of the sounds. I kind of knew I immediately had a kinship with this composer, Thor High Heels, before the end of the game, because I think in the second area there are a lot of songs that start using some particular samples from like very, very notable 90s sample CDs that were used in games a lot, and just it feels like kind of a wink to all the other composers out there who like this particular style. And with me making like a lot of Jet Set Radio and Silent Hill type music, I had to delve into a lot of these same CDs. So hearing these sounds that I know, you would think might be like make you less excited about the music, but for me it's more fun to have these winks. And I really, really enjoyed it, and immediately shouted him out on Twitter and referenced the 90s sample CDs commonality. And there's also another song in the Contact level that sounds a lot like a Silent Hill, Mellotron, creepy doldrums kind of beat. So having those two styles, Jet Set Radio and Silent Hill, in one game was pretty much my brand. Honestly, this entire game feels a little bit like someone was just watching what I like and put it all in a game, because it also has kaiju. And if anyone follows me, they know that I'm really into Godzilla. So it just has everything. They just spared no expense to get me for this to be my number one game of 2020.
Yeah, it's I did not know what to expect first getting into this game, because I hadn't heard too much about it. I heard a little bit on, I think it was either Waypoint Radio or Giant Bomb, a little bit. But I had not seen much advertising for it, and it's an indie game on Steam, so it's very easy to lose indie games on Steam. But it definitely punched well above its weight class in terms of the number of developers. I mean, we've played a bunch of games that have much bigger budgets and are in some ways aspiring to move players in the way that, blockbuster movies do. And I felt like this game, with unity and aesthetic and a camera, did a lot more to move me than a lot of mocap and great voice acting. Or cool. I mean, there's no cutscenes in this game to speak of either. Mm-hmm. So, turns out you can still make a really affecting game without any of that stuff.
It's an immersive sci-fi political kind of thing, but with a unique style and sense of adventure to it as well. It's a really incredible video game experience, and I don't think I'll have another one like it in a while.
Yeah. So I definitely think, check out Umuragni Generation. If you haven't been convinced when we said it, you should definitely check it out. At least check out the demo. Great experience. I enjoyed it. It does not waste your time. It's very snappy. Hey, you can get your photography on. Everyone likes that. And I think it's extra important now because it's also relevant to the moment. Pokemon Snap's coming back. So you need to warm up. Get those reps. take pictures of giant kaiju so that next time when you take pictures of the Pokemon kaiju, it's okay. You'll know what to do. So with that, I think that's everything for Umuragni Generation. Pete, I believe it is your turn to pick again.
Yes, we've come back around to me, and if I thought we'd just keep things running with the political train, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick a game that is currently in early access, but it might be a while before it exits, and I think it's going to be a cool game to play right now. I want to play Not for Broadcast. So this is a game where you are in charge of a propaganda news station, and you have to decide what goes out and gets broadcasted to the world, to the nation, to the masses. So it's sort of an interesting mix of like simulation gameplay and real world live action footage.
Oh, wow. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, my. Yep, those are people acting. This is some FMV shit.
Yeah.
It's going to be intense.
Production crew FMV simulator.
Yes. Okay, great. So next we're playing Not for Broadcast. Check that out. Ooh, this is going to be fun. Okay. So once again, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can support the show, patreon.com/deeplistens. Thank you, Mello. Anything to plug?
Well, things are slow right now, everywhere. But I do have a Patreon that's been doing pretty well. Patreon.com/2mellow, number 2 MELLO, no W, where I kind of reformatted it and revamped it for the first time since like 2015 at the beginning of this year. And it's been going well. I do a lot of remixes. I share like personal notes and like write a blog post about something every month. I do sound design challenges. I let people vote on what I'm going to do on streams. So basically, if you like my music and you want to see the most possible look behind the curtain I can give you, that's this Patreon.
Excellent. Thank you, Pete.
Yep. Good one. Like Gino said, worth checking out. I encourage everyone to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, listeners. Until next time, peace.